Order. Let me see if I get my. There we go. I'm going to ask Vice Chairman Kirby to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all the blessings you bestowed on us. We ask you to be with us, guide us, and direct us as we go through the business of this committee and this legislative session. And all these things we ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Dewey. I appreciate that. We don't have any bills to present today, but today we have a very important meeting. It's something I think ought to be an annual thing for our committee, and it gives us a chance to have an update. And we, of course, have a lot of new members on our committee as well. And we get a chance to get an update and also kind of overview of what a couple different groups we deal with a lot do for our state. And first on the agenda is a presentation from the State Board of Workers' Compensation. And we have the chairman, Judge Frank McKay, here with us. And I'll just go ahead and turn it over to you. Get your mic on. We'll let him present, then we'll open up for some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the invitation to come and speak, and members of the committee, very important committee in the world of workers' compensation, the Industry and Labor Committee, and we appreciate all that you do, and thank you for serving on this committee. Most of the workers' compensation issues come your way. I am Frank McKay, and I'm the chairman of the Georgia State Board of Workers' Compensation. That position also makes me the chief appellate court judge, and we have appellate division. Myself and Judge and Director Elizabeth Gobiel, who is seated back here, is one of my co-directors, and we hear the appeals of all the workers' compensation cases that are tried around the state of Georgia. We have 20 judges that try the cases in Atlanta and in the various field offices in Georgia, which is Savannah and Columbus and Macon and Gainesville and Dalton. And so we hear those appeals, but as chairman, very involved in the entirety of our workers' compensation system, and I'm very proud of it. I've been the chairman for 4 years now. I came out of private law practice where I practiced workers' compensation. I went to Mercer Law School, and my first case I ever handled out of law school was a workers' compensation case, and the last file that I put down before coming to be the chairman was a workers' compensation case, and I have always enjoyed practicing that. It's a very esoteric area of law, very highly specialized, and you don't have lawyers or practitioners that dabble in workers' compensation. You're either all in or you're not in. It's a fairly complicated and narrow body of law with the Workers' Compensation Act. We have a very good system in Georgia. We are one of only 6 states in the nation that has an A rating for its workers' compensation system from the Workers' Compensation Data Loss Institute, and that's because we have a reputation of having a very fair and balanced system. And we're always weighing and balancing the interest of all the stakeholders in workers' compensation. It affects the lives of every citizen in the state of Georgia, really. It affects certainly an injured employee, but all employers. We have a workforce in Georgia of about 3.7 million employees at this point. And the businesses and employers that we see are all affected by that. And then the stakeholders in the workers' compensation system, besides the employees and employers, are insurance companies, third-party administrators. Some of the employers are insured for workers' compensation. Some of our larger employers are self-insured. The medical community, we have a highly qualified medical community in Georgia that are willing to take workers' compensation patients as part of their practice. Some states have a problem with that, but we regulate the fee schedule as part at the state board, make that, try to balance those interests of how much that is and pay for quality of care, and we have that, and we keep a pretty balanced system. What I will mention, a little bit of data, is there's about $2.3 billion every year that flow in and out of the Georgia workers' compensation system. It's about $1.4 billion that is paid by employers to insurance companies to have workers' compensation insurance. And then there's another about 750 to 800 million that are the self-insured retention part. So add those two together, and we're at about that $2.4 billion. And that's about the same figure that is paid out every year in medical and disability benefits. So that's what I mean when I say that 2.3, 2.4 billion, they flow into the workers' comp system and flows out. And so that money's changing hands. And so anytime you have that kind of money changing hands, you have a lot of eyes on it, which are the stakeholders, and so you have a lot of involvement in that in our workers' compensation system. It's interesting. I think it's a good sign for our state in the economic development and the progress that we are when we look at how much the insurance premium was for the last full year of data that we have is 2015, which was $1.447 billion, and that was 2015. In 2010, that figure was $953 million. That 2010 was at the bottom of the depths of the recession, and when you look at the high water mark prior to that, it was the end of the 2006-2007 year. We just in 2015 back above that, so it set a record level, and what that means is that's really a good economic indicator for the state of Georgia. That means there's that much growth, and businesses have been growing in Georgia, that premium level has continued to rise to a record level, which of course is based on payroll in the state of Georgia. So we have that. What I wanted to talk about a little bit is I'm fortunate to have been elected president of the Southern Association of Workers' Compensation Administrators, and that's a 20-state organization. It's all the southeastern states and a few others. As far north as Maine, as far west as Colorado, have wanted to join the association. And I am asked to speak from time to time, typically every year, once or twice, about something that we have in Georgia that's very unique, and it's our advisory council. After the 1992 legislative session, the advisory council was born and came to birth in about 1993. So it's about 24 years old now, and it came to be because of, it was an extremely contentious legislative session in 1992. And it had bills related to workers' compensation filed from many different individuals. And it had committee members kind of at odds with each other and completely different interests depending on their constituency and their interest. And it was sort of a reform type of movement. Wasn't totally unique to Georgia. At that time, it was sort of across the nation. There was a lot of type reform type movement. And after that, the leaders of this committee, leaders from the governor at the time, and on the Senate side, the Insurance and Labor Committee, came to the state board and said, surely there's another way or a better way to really discuss workers' compensation legislation, rather than getting all these bills filed in the middle of the session and having a 40-day session to try to wrestle with those kinds of issues that are pretty esoteric in nature. And so the advisory council was born then, and it has been a huge success for the state of Georgia. I was asked to speak to a group from Florida not too long ago because they don't have anything like it, and they haven't had the success like that either. They have had massive swings in their compensation system. They had a Supreme Court of Florida two decisions last year that struck a large part of their Workers' Comp Act as being unconstitutional as a result of some 2003 legislation that was passed. So they've had some major issues. We've been able to avoid all of that in the state of Georgia. It's really been very, very good for us. And what we now have are 6 committees that make up our advisory council. We have a legislative committee to vet and discuss possible legislation. And those requests may come from you, may come from other members of the House, other constituents, other stakeholders. We have a rules committee because in the Workers' Compensation Act, there's a whole set of rules that correspond with the actual legislation, the laws that the House passes. And then we have a medical committee, focuses on all the various medical issues, and there are a lot of different medical issues, a licensure and self-insurance committee, a managed care and rehabilitation committee, and a public education committee that travels around the state, typically 4 or 5 cities a year, and puts on a regional educational conference, primarily geared for employers in that area to kind of educate them about rights and responsibilities under the Workers' Compensation Act. That has been a really big success, and it is here, it helps me as chairman because I get all kinds of requests and ideas from within the system for changes, whether it be a rule change or a legislative change. And sometimes those come from somebody and it's pretty narrowly requested. It's because of a particular constituent request or something. And we try to discuss that and vet that through our advisory council to see, well, will this be good for the system as a whole, for the entire state of Georgia? Would this be a good idea to do? And that helps us, and it can help you. And I offer that advisory council to you because it is between those 6 committees, about an equal number on pretty much each committee. We've got about 110 members between the 6 committees. And it is a workers' compensation educational think tank. I mean, everybody that's on there are experts in workers' compensation. It's what they do, whether they're a lawyer practicing, representing employers, insurers, or self-insureds, or representing injured workers, or we have doctors, we have orthopedic surgeons, we have pharmacists, we have all kinds of issues. We have the TPAs, the insurance company folks that handle claims. We have nurses, physical therapists, and from the medical community. So we really cover all the different stakeholders there. And they're able to lend their time and their expertise to discuss, in the trenches, how workers' compensation works and what's practical and what might be good for the state of Georgia. And so we can offer that to you anytime you get a possible legislative idea. There was a hot topic, and you've been wrestling with it ever since last year on the House Bill 146 that passed yesterday for firefighters to have an option to provide a group disability plan. It wouldn't have to even get into causation or work-relatedness, and that is a great idea. And that was wrestled with the advisory council. Y'all wrestled with it last session, and so far this session, and there were those getting down into the nitty-gritty, the payment issues, and how that's going to be funded, how it would be paid if it was going to be workers' compensation. Is it going to be an automatic presumption without requiring any kind of proof of work-relatedness or all? These were all very weighty issues that can expand beyond just that particular group. So y'all have done a great job with that, where that is on that track that's headed, and there was a lot of concern about that within the workers' compensation community about how that was, where that might go. So that's an example of some help that can come on an area like that, or any other kind of bill or legislation that might be proposed to a constituent or something from your district. We have had, as an aside, we have over the last 24 years, we've had legislators, if they're presented with an idea, have asked, well, has this idea been vetted through the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council? Because it has been seen like would be a good thing to have that time to vet that. And we typically, because we're meeting throughout the year, and it's really hard to thoroughly discuss an issue amidst everything else that you're dealing with in a 40-day session, whereas we're meeting throughout the year with our various committees and can really put in the time to look at those kinds of issues. There's one other thing before I conclude and be glad to take any questions that you might have. There's an issue that's a hot issue in Georgia. It's a hot issue nationwide. I watched the CBS National News last night, and they had a topic on this last night. And I've been seeing it for months now, the last couple of years. And it's the number of opioid prescriptions that are written, and the addiction rates and the impact that has on individuals. I know I can't speak to an audience these days without someone in the audience being personally affected by an opioid prescription, or their spouse, or a child, or somebody they work with, or a colleague or something. 2015, there were 7.8 million opioid prescriptions written in the state of Georgia. Every doctor that I talk to, whether they're an orthopedic surgeon all the way to a pain management specialist, agrees that's too many. That's way too many. Everybody acknowledges that there is a problem. What is the solution? It's probably a multifaceted solution. I know there's been a Senate subcommittee on opioids, made the antidote naloxone a lot more readily available, but there's still work to be done. It's not just a workers' compensation issue, it's a statewide issue. Anything comes your way on that, we would be grateful. We would thank you for anything you can do to help be part of that solution, and there's probably multiple factors that could be there, and hopefully out of those other committees in the legislature, something good will come out. I know the governor mentioned it in his state address this year, the opioid problem. So it's a very real and pressing problem. Fortunately, it's getting a lot of national news. I mentioned our director, Elizabeth Gobill. She went to the National Drug Summit last year, which the president came. It was held here in Atlanta. It'll be held here in Atlanta again in July. And a huge part of their agenda for this coming July is on the opioid prescription issue. But Chairman Strickland, I'll stop there and take any.
Anybody have any questions for the judge? The judge and the chairman. I'm not sure which one to call you, but judge comes more natural and not in session, so I'm gonna call you judge today. Who is 25? Chairman Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you know, we're looking at a lot going on this year, talking about balance billing, and I'm flipping over to the health side, but I'm just curious on the workers' compensation side. We use a formula. Is that a federal formula as far as the fee schedule for providers? I was just wondering if you could tell me how that works exactly, or tell the committee on the comp side, and how that works in your opinion.
Okay. Medical billing is a highly complicated area with all the CPT codes and the other diagnostic codes. We basically use a Medicare-based system, but it pays more than what Medicare pays, because we have about 140,000 injured employees a year that are seeking medical treatment under the Workers' Compensation Act. So that's a lot smaller pool of patients than statewide. We've got 10.2 million folks or so in Georgia. So our fee schedule is geared to buy access to quality physicians. So we take the Medicare levels and then add a little bit to it. We have to use a vendor, national vendor, and we use Fair Health to do our fee schedule book, and it's about that thick, and it has all the different codes, and so many of the surgery procedures are bundled together, and it looks into what those charges are for hospitals, what the charges are if that same procedure is done in an ambulatory surgical center on an outpatient basis, and we look at all of those codes, and so we're looking at that every year. It is working pretty good in Georgia. I mean, as far as the workers' comp fee schedule, where we do have an issue is we're seeing an increase in networks, and networks are groups that are sort of put together, and an entity will offer medical service at a cheaper price, supposedly based on volume. We're seeing some complaints from some of the medical providers, particularly on the physical therapy side and a little bit on the orthopedic side, of the role that networks are playing. It's sort of unregulated, and so we have that issue that we're wrestling with. But does that help? Does that sort of address what you're talking about with the fee schedule? And
yeah, there's just obviously, like I said, there's a lot of discussion going on about how we look at this, the big picture on the health side too. But just curious how it's done, because we've definitely got a strong work comp system in Georgia, thanks to the hard work of the State Work Comp Board and the Advisory Council. And just appreciate what y'all do.
Thank you. Appreciate your time as chairman of this committee as well.
It was a pleasure working with you.
Years. Wonderful job.
Vice Chairman Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here and having done employer workers comp for about 24 years in about 13 states. I can agree that Georgia works much better than a lot of places. So we appreciate that and all your work. You do you hear the appeals.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, is there anything that stands out, any type of claim seems to be the most type of appeals, either from an employer or employee perspective, that maybe is more of an education thing that we're not getting out there, or is it just so wide across the board that there's nothing that really stands out?
It's very wide and across the board. It makes the job very interesting, because it really runs the gamut of issue. We had court today. I just finished and came over here, and I get, and when I mentioned the opioids, I mean, we're seeing that on a fairly high number of cases where that's an issue. The amount of opioids that are being prescribed in a case, and sometimes there's multiple prescribers, treating physicians on a case, and there might be both prescribing, and maybe they don't know what the other physician is prescribing. Sort of gets into some of the physician drug monitoring program type issues there that the state's wrestling with. You know, we're always wrestling with, it's under the category called misclassification of employees. And its meaning is, are they misclassified by their employer, whoever's paying them, as an independent contractor versus an actual employee where they're basically controlling time, manner, method, means of that individual. We see those cases are an issue. They're an issue in the insurance industry regarding premium and unpaid premium, but yet coverage ultimately being provided, because typically the answer as to whether any individual person is an employee or an independent contractor is a question of law and fact mixed together. You gotta ascertain exactly what the facts are of that particular employment relationship and then apply the Georgia law as to whether they're an employee or not. We see that issue a fair amount, but we see a host of different issues.
What about percentage of those that are overturned or sustained? Pretty even split, or do you send more of them back than you affirm?
Well, and so ours, we affirm more of our judges than we reverse, but there's probably about, and I don't have the statistic on it, but I'd say it's probably 20-25% that are reversed or either amended or changed, and then most of our decisions that go on up to either Superior Court as a matter of right, law, can go to Superior Court, and then a petition to the Court of Appeals. By far and away, most are affirmed in a typical year.
Okay. And final question, you kind of going back to where you talked about on the opioids and everything and the doctors. Do we have enough controls in the referral network? You know, I've always pushed from the employer standpoint, with the fiduciary relationship with that doctor is really me as the employer paying the bill. We want our employee taken care of, but we've always tried to control the referral so we don't have multiple doctors in there. Is the law such that it's really working like it should, or should we tighten that up more, or what do you think?
I think it's working pretty good. And that's part. A lot of times we usually touch on the panel of physicians every year in our regional educational seminars, because if an employer has their panel, and we did make a substantial change through our rulemaking authority 2 years ago to allow an employer to have physicians that are associated with each other on their panel. They used to have to be completely non-associated. Well, the problem with that was we were seeing so many consolidations of practices, hospitals that were hiring their own medical staff, and so that makes it easier for an employer to have a good, strong, valid panel. But our rules are strong, and then that's a good example of a series of rights and responsibilities. Rights that the employer has and responsibilities, and the rights that the employee has and responsibilities to get treatment off of that panel from a physician that the employer has selected and put on there. They can make a referral, and that would be authorized, but that doctor has to make the referral. It can't just be a referral can't come from some other source, and then whoever that panel doctor refers to, they cannot make an additional referral without getting the okay from that panel doctor. I mean, sometimes they do, but then that's the responsibility of whoever's handling that claim to catch that and say, wait a minute, now we're starting to get 2 or 3 or 4 doctors away from our panel. And so we've got good law on that. We get some of those cases, and we're very strong on enforcing the panel.
Because we've seen what I call the good old boy network, where they know comp pays their bills pretty good, so if I pass them on to 3 or 4 of my buddies, it seems to make them happy. So it does happen.
They have the right to make that one referral, but not to continue.
Representative McLean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chairman, for asking almost all my questions, but that's okay. I appreciate that. I guess my question to you are the increase and decrease in in claims? Have you seen the claims increase any, or?
You know, they've been, for the last 5 years, they've been very stable. And we're getting about 140 to 145,000 total claims, and about 110,000 of those are just medical only. Employees hurt at work, get some medical treatment, comes right back to work, never misses any time. We see about 40,000 that are more serious injuries that involve time missed from work of a week or more. And but the total number has actually been very steady. We're kind of expecting to see a little bit of a tick up because of that number I mentioned earlier, just showing the sign of there's a lot of construction starts and business, the new jobs that the state has experienced the last few years. We're expecting to see that because that's a tail that you normally see after you see a whole bunch of new jobs, but we're not yet. It's been, the number of claims has been very, very stable.
Okay. And I guess you really open it up because misclassification, you touched on it, but this committee a couple of years ago, we got a misclassification bill out, but it didn't go very far. It stayed in rules. Do you think the definition, or if you had something that could define what misclassification was, an employee being either an employee or an independent contractor, the definition, do you think that would help you some?
It probably, we've wrestled with how to come up with a rule or a guideline that you could just throw out for the entire state. We can handle it on a case-by-case basis because we'd have to. We get those, individual cases. Is this an employee or independent contractor? It may be as much of an insurance industry issue. I mean, they're very concerned about it because they know that they're not getting premium for workers' compensation if employers misclassifying their workforce all as independent contractors, but yet they know if they get hurt on the job and they have a claim, then they're probably going to be found to be an employee possibly under the employer's workers' comp policy, which may be paid on a lot lower payroll than what their really exposure is. That's a great question. It's hard. I don't have a good answer. I don't have the answer for sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to hear your comments on it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see any other questions, but Judge, thank you for taking the time to come present to us today. Thank you for your service to our state, and thank you for being so patient with us too. I know I scheduled you a week ago and last minute rescheduled you along with the commissioner over there as well. So thank you for coming back and being so available to our committee as well.
Okay, all right. Thank you
Look
very
forward
much.
to working with you more.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we're going to hear an update from Department of Labor, and we have our Commissioner Mark Butler back there. There he is, hiding behind the pole over there.
We got the same question.
And I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Chairman. We'll try to. We've got a lot going on at Department of Labor right now, and I'm going to do my best to keep this in the time that has been allotted. And what I'd like to start with first of all is if you've been keeping up with the unemployment rate in the last 4 months that you've been reporting, you've actually seen the unemployment rate in Georgia go up. So a lot of people think, well, don't you think it's time to start panicking? Things must be bad. Actually, it's actually good news. The unemployment rate has been going up in the last 4 months. And the reason for that is if you've been talking to any of your employers around the state, most of them are telling us that they are struggling to find enough people for the job openings that they have. Matter of fact, I just met with some folks earlier today and they said they were struggling also. The reason for your unemployment rate going up has to do with the fact that our workforce has been expanding this year. And our participation rate in our workforce has actually gone up. Matter of fact, we now have a higher participation rate here in Georgia than the national average, which that's very good news. That means more people are working, more people out there that are participating in the workforce. Now, to give you an idea of how much our workforce has expanded in just the last year, we added over 200,000 people into our workforce this last year. And the reason for your unemployment rate going up for the last 4 months, half of those people joined the workforce in the last 4 months alone. People say, well, where are they coming from? Well, some of them are people that had lived in Georgia that previously had not been working and decided to look for work, but a lot of those individuals are moving to Georgia. So it ought to be very interesting when our next census comes up to see where we fall, because
By our best guesstimates of what we're looking at, you've seen a lot of people that are moving to Georgia. And the reason why they're moving to Georgia is because we have a lot of job openings. If anybody's, I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, we have a new online job search engine. It's also a new job posting system called Employ Georgia. At any time, if you want to, you can log on to Employ Georgia, and we have a little a counter up there. It tells you how many active job listings are currently in Georgia at any given moment and how many were posted the previous day. I just checked right before I came up here. We have over 112,000 active job openings in Georgia today. And so that's a fair amount of jobs we have to get filled. And I want to briefly talk to you about what we're doing in that arena. Our business service unit is a unit that we created to help get Georgians back to work faster and also to help work with our businesses. There are 13 regional representatives around the state to make sure that we cover all of the state. We work with Department of Economic Development. We also work with local economic developers. And through this particular unit, they actually do a number of different jobs. And now, before I go through the jobs, I want you to understand there's only 60 people in this unit for the entire state, okay? Which seems like a lot until you spread it out over the state, and then it seems like a really small number, especially when you consider the fact that just over this last year, they assisted over 7,000 either unemployed or underemployed Georgians. We've also held over 50 recruitment events for different businesses. And also, we've had a very successful program that's very unique to Georgia. It's called Customized Recruitment. I don't know if any of y'all have ever heard us mention that before. We don't go out and advertise. It's not something we hang out on a billboard because it's an idea that we came up with to assist with economic development. And as a matter of fact, at first we started marketing it, but now the marketing for that program is actually handled by the Department of Economic Development. And what we use it for an incentive to help businesses or get businesses to come to Georgia. And what we do is we work with the businesses coming to Georgia and we say, look, if you'll come to Georgia, we will take over the recruitment for your employment needs. You come to Georgia, no matter if you need 100 or 500, we will put dedicated individuals on the ground that works only with your company. We'll make sure you get those employees quick. When you see our turnaround times, it's pretty amazing what this division's been able to do with the amount of people. You go back in the days before we had this, it might take a company 6 to 8 months to fully staff up when they finally get things up and running. We've been able to do some of these projects in less than 30 days, anywhere from 30 to 60 days. And we do anything from, say, a minimally skilled manufacturing plant where basically, and I kid you not, the employer says, I need 100 people that will show up and work. When you say, what kind of skills you need? I need 100 people that will show up and work, and that's what they want. All right, we go anything from that to we did the recruitment for Mercedes-Benz, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. So we did, so that's a pretty big difference in type of recruitment you're talking about, and all these have been extremely successful. What's even more successful is when you take a look at those individuals that we've recruited for these companies, our turnover rate with the employees that we are handing over to them, these fully qualified employees, is less than 10%. If anybody knows anything about hiring, 10% turnover rate is really good for initial hire. I mean, that's way better than the national average. I think the national average is closer to 25%. So they're doing a really good job, and the reason why that is so important is because when the next company looks at Georgia, they call the previous ones that we've brought in, and the story they're going to hear from that company is, we had a very good experience in Georgia. They promised us employees, they promised us talent, and they delivered on talent. In fact, I jokingly said the other day, economic development is our sales team, Department of Labor is the service department. And we've been very successful at making sure that we keep these companies happy, because if they're happy, then they're going to help us attract more companies and put more Georgians to work. Now, as we go out there and we talk to employers around the state, one of the biggest complaints that we have heard when it comes to finding a qualified workforce, outside of the things that you hear about, well, we don't have enough welders, or we don't have enough machinists, or we don't have enough computer programmers, the one thing that we heard the most was, we can't find people that have good customer service skills or good soft skills. And so we started a program it's almost 4 years ago now, called Georgia Best. It's a soft skills program. We have in almost 200 high schools around the state. We're in about 30 middle schools. As a matter of fact, we're also in a couple of the DJJ prep academies. We're in at least one correctional facility and one of their reentry programs. We're also in several of the technical colleges, and quite frankly, a few private schools have picked up the program. And what the program simply does is it shows people and teaches people the importance of soft skills and how it can make you very successful. And as we have seen across, when we talk to employers, they'll say, look, if you bring me somebody that's got the willingness to work and has really strong soft skills, if they don't have the training, but they have the soft skills, we'll train them. I'll take that on. And so it's become very successful. And just so you know that we decided to test our theory about, how big a deal soft skills are and how Georgia Best is. And so we actually sent out a survey, and the responses we got back a lot more than what we thought. We had over 330 companies actually send their survey back to us, and they filled it out. And we found some really good information from it. One of the things they talked about, we asked them, said, well, what is the biggest reason for your turnover rate? And just under 50% of the companies told us that the biggest reason for turnover rate that they saw was a lack of soft skills. Of course, I think that number could be low, because I could probably make the argument most things that people get fired over has to do with soft skills. Because, if you're not showing up on time, that's a soft skills issue. If you're stealing, that's a soft skills issue. If you're not dressed appropriately, that's a soft skills issue. If you're not able to work well with others, that's a soft skills issue. So matter of fact, a lot of times I'll get in front of HR managers and I'll say, somebody give me a reason other than a soft skills issue that you had to terminate somebody. And very rarely can I ever find anybody that can stump me. I can pretty much equate anything to a soft skills issue. And so they told us that. They also said that 95% of all of these that were surveyed said they do believe that we need soft skills training. That's a pretty high number. And so we know that from getting the survey numbers back that, this is a necessary program. And so we're going to keep expanding it. Matter of fact, we're working on one that employers can use to help their current employees to not only maintain their soft skills, but also to grow their soft skills, which we think will be very good, and also helping keep people employed, which is something that we definitely want to do. Now, the last thing that I want to cover, or the two last things I want to cover, has to do with the other part of our agency, which has to do with unemployment. As some of y'all that have been here for a while may remember, we've had a significant issue years ago with our UI Trust Fund. You have some handouts in the black folder that you were handed. And we sent you, we have a little thing here that talks about the health of the UI Trust Fund. It gives you current stats, but there is one stat that's wrong on there, mainly because we just got the new number an hour ago after we'd already printed this, and that is the trust fund balance. It is not 1.3 billion anymore. It's 1.4 billion. So we gained a little money over the last week. So we're getting better. It goes down through here and it tells you just the pertinent facts, but the most interesting thing that you need to look at is take a look at the bottom and about the tax revenue. As you see, over the last few years, we've had pretty good returns on tax revenue, but those amounts keep getting less. Now, a lot of people think that, well, economy's doing better, more people are working, you should have more taxes. Actually, that's not necessarily true with UI taxes, because as more people are employed, less unemployment taxes are paid, rates go down, which is your tax rates, and then you bring in less money. So that's why we have to be very cautious about what we do with the trust fund, what we do with tax rates, because we need that number. Now, 1.4 billion seems like a lot of money, but understand that we had a little bit more than that in our trust fund when the recession hit, and we went over all of that plus another billion. So that's not enough. This trust fund needs to be somewhere between 2.5 or $3 billion, just in case we have to go through what we just went through during this last recession. Because the last thing we ever want to do again is get into a recession, have to borrow money, and have to go up on taxes with our businesses who are already having to struggle through the recession. So there'll be some good information in there. Gives you some good ideas of what's going on with the trust fund. Also, a lot of other small facts in there about how much was paid out any given time. So if you have any questions about that, if any of it looks confusing, just please feel free to ask. The last thing I want to talk to you about is something that is also very important that you haven't heard much of, which is one of the biggest projects we have and have had going at Department of Labor. Matter of fact, we started this program soon after I came into office, and that is the modernization of our unemployment system. And when I say the system, I'm talking about the actual computer system that runs our unemployment. The one that we currently are using right now today is 40 years old. It's run on a very old platform. It's not supported anymore. We're almost literally holding it together with duct tape. And so we went into a partnership with North Carolina and South Carolina and got a grant from the U.S. Department of Labor of around $55 million, and have working with a vendor and have been working to build a new system from scratch. And the reason why you can't just go out and buy one of these systems is because nobody has one really out there. Matter of fact, there are very few companies that are even going into this business anymore to look at it because it's very hard to build one of these systems. South Carolina is going live in April. They're going to be the first of the 3 states to go live with it, then North Carolina, and then us. Now, when we get closer to the August go live date, we'll be sending out some information to all the House members and Senate members to let you know, because there's a very good chance you may get some phone calls. Because like any new type technology like this one, especially as complicated as this one is, there could be some glitches. Now, I'm hoping not, since I finagled us to go last and everybody else is going to have to go through it first. Maybe they'll get all the bugs out of it before it gets to Georgia. And the way I rigged that up was I think the smallest state with the fewest claimants should go first, so South Carolina got put in there. So it's good to be the larger state. But just want you to know this is going to be a really good system. We're very excited about it. This is a big lift. This is no small task. This is going to be a major change for us. And we're just a little bit nervous about it, but it has to be done. It's going to give better service to our customers, which are going to be the claimants. It should make this process much easier for them. I've seen the system. I've seen both ends of it. I've seen the customers' screens, and I've seen our employees' screens. If you ever want to know what our current screens look like, if you've ever been at Delta and you've seen the reservation screen that they're looking at, it's green. Well, that's what ours looks like too. So, like I said, it's a very, very old system. So it's a very big project, and just want to let you know that this is about to go online. But we're going to keep you informed. So if you do get phone calls, hopefully you will not. Hopefully nobody calls and everything goes smoothly. But that way you'll know what's going on, and we'll also give you a way to get in contact with us to take care of any of your constituents' issues should they have problems.
Okay. I do have one question to start. It's still a question for one of my friends already. The issue of misclassification of workers, I had a little bill last year that helped address exposing fraud in the system with misclassification of workers. And also, it's my understanding the department now has something on your website as well for whistleblowers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes, we have a whistleblower, it's an email or in phone. Way you can contact us if you think that there is an issue. And then we can go out and investigate. I think last count this past year, I think we've had like 156 complaints so far this year that we've been out investigating. But right now, we know when it comes to investigating it, we only have 89 investigators that cover the entire state, which also those same individuals are required to audit at least 1%, randomly audit 1% of all businesses in the state of Georgia. And there's a lot of business in the state of Georgia. So you're talking we have to do somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,300 random audits on top of anything that we're sent to investigate. But we've actually done some really good work even with those low numbers of individuals out there looking at it. In just the last few years, we've uncovered over 10,000 instances of misclassification that we've been able to investigate and also enforce.
Okay. All right. Who is 16? Representative Park?
Thank you, Commissioner Butler. So my question was in regards to the 112,000 job openings that are currently listed on the website. Do y'all have a breakdown in terms of the types of jobs that those are? In particular, the skills gap between all the folks coming into Georgia as well as the jobs that currently exist is of concern. Georgia Gwinnett College, or Gwinnett Technical College, is also in my district, and of course they're working on bridging that gap.
Well, you'll be happy to know that we do have the ability to take a look at those. Now, not everybody puts all the information in all the blank spaces, but from what I call qualified, job postings, which means that they've got everything filled out and we have all the data in the data set. We're showing about the last. I'm doing this from memory, so don't if I get this off by 1 or 2%, don't hold me to it, but. somewhere in the neighborhood of about 60% of all the job postings that are currently out there right now require at least an associate's degree or higher. Now, that's a really, that's a good number. Now, the rest of those job postings that don't, have that on there, some of those, it says high school or certificate training. Well, certificate training could be anything from welding, CDL, which if anybody knows anything about truck driving, right now that is one of the hottest jobs in the state of Georgia. Talked to a guy the other day that had a trucking company, and he was hiring, and I said, well, how many truck drivers do you need? And he told me, he says, well, you keep sending them, I'll tell you when to stop. And so, I mean, there's just not enough. And also, if you talk about STEM occupations, I think if I remember correctly, about 35% of all are actually STEM vocations that are in those job listings. So, and that's a really high percentage too, nationally compared.
Follow-up, Chairman?
Sure.
Do these job listings also have salaries and potential salaries? I know after the Great Recession hit, a lot of the more higher income jobs didn't necessarily return immediately. Those more low income, not too many middle class jobs either. So any comments on that?
Some of them do have them on there, but a lot of people don't put that on there anymore. So there's not enough of that in there to give you what I'd call a real accurate number. But you also have to remember Georgia. When you take a look at some of the different fields, those averages are going to be all over the place because what they pay here in Metro Atlanta is much different than say what they're going to pay for an IT job in say Augusta. And it's going to be a little bit, different. And that's actually one of our hotbeds of IT jobs now. If y'all don't know this, is actually the Augusta area. A lot going on in IT over there. It's very exciting what we're seeing. It's like it's kind of a micro set of what we're seeing in Atlanta, and that's two of our big hubs. But most of your larger cities are seeing a lot of really good job growth, and most of the jobs that we're seeing are good quality jobs.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Representative McLean?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Commissioner. Because it's always good seeing my friend back in the back too. Good to see you too, Tim. Thank you. The question I have is that misclassification, the revenue. It's do you have any idea how much revenue that the state is missing by the employers misclassifying employees?
Well, I know that USDOL put some number out there that they thought it was like $1 million or something like that. I think that may be a little bit high because we've seen some numbers where in other states where they have looked at some stuff and it seems a little high, but it's really kind of hard to pin that down. And also, mainly because of the fact it depends on who you ask. One of the issues that we see, and I'm sure you're very aware of this, there's a lot of disagreement on certain misclassification. I mean, there's some things that are absolutely obvious. Matter of fact, we ran into a case that we investigated a few years ago. It was a construction company working on the south side of Atlanta, and we got a tip on it, and so we went and looked at it, and it was the ones that we were investigating had to do with masonry, and bricklayers, what I would call it where I'm from. And every single person that was laying brick for this company, he had put down as an independent contractor. I'm like, no. That's not going to fly. That is not. They're using your stuff. You got to be. And so, I mean, those kind of things, obviously, those are obvious ones. But then there's some that are not so obvious. And so there's a lot of talk about that. We've seen some accountants, some people say, well, no, that's an employee. Well, no, they're not because they have another, client over here. Now, so it depends on who you ask. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of debate with like your Uber drivers or the Lyft drivers. Are they employees or are they self-employed? So I think that, I'd hate to be in your shoes right now because there's a lot of things that need to be weighed and figure out what you want to be considered an employee or be considered independent contractor. And same thing in the CDL drivers with your commercial drivers that's a really big issue with it too. And we've run into that several times where we have got in the middle of a company and we know is it an independent contractor or is it an employee? So to really give you an actual number how much you're missing out on, I mean I think it'd be really hard to say.
Thank you. No follow-up, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the UI benefit wages weekly. We're 14 to 20 weeks, and before the Great Recession, and I guess my question would be, how soon? I mean, it's we making sure if people finding work 14 to 20 weeks. Do you think that's adequate or?
Well, right now we have the lowest duration on unemployment in the nation at 8.5 weeks. Some people think, well, 14 weeks, that don't seem like that long. It's 3 months. And right now I can tell you in this job market, you should be able to find a job in 3 months, honestly. I mean, it's a very hot job market unless you are unfortunate to be in one of those positions where you have a skill set that is no longer needed. That individual is going to need to be retrained, and there is opportunities for that. Look, working with your local workforce boards, there's some retraining money that's out there. A lot of people are not aware of that, and so we try to, when they come in to see us, we try to redirect them to make sure they understand that there's an opportunity for them to go back to school, go back to one of our technical colleges or our university, depending on what they're looking to do. There's a lot of things out there for them. I mean, I think right now, at this low rate of unemployment that we're seeing, I mean, we're almost at full employment from what we're telling right now. When you take a look where the employers are having a struggle like they are to find employees and the complaints that we're getting, I mean, all of our recruiters around the state are slammed right now, trying to help these folks find people.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On your sheet here, you've got our U3 number at 5.4. Are we still below 10 on our U6 number? At last I saw was 9.8.
I don't really have
You
that
don't-
with me, but I can tell you what I tell everybody else. Quit
Mhm.
paying attention to the percentages. Matter of fact, when I go talk to most groups, I say, quit paying attention to the unemployment rate, because it really is just not a good judge of where we are in our economy. Matter of fact, the AJC finally agreed with me the other day and had it printed in one of their articles saying, you know, the unemployment rate really doesn't matter as much anymore. Really what we look at right now is are people coming back into the workforce, which means that they're encouraged? Yes. Are those people finding jobs? The vast majority of them are being employed. Yes. Are claims for unemployment going down? Yes. Those three numbers, those numbers that we know. And so with those going in the direction we're going, that's good news for Georgia right now. And we don't continue. Because like I've seen months where the unemployment rate went down and it was all for bad news. People say, well, how can that be? Well, if you have, 40,000 people leave the workforce in 1 month, your unemployment rate is going to go down, even if you lose 10,000 jobs. Because there's just less people out there that are even looking. They've given up. But we're not seeing that. Right now, we are bucking the trend in Georgia.
All right. You're talking about getting people willing to work in soft skills. What are you doing are you working anything with the technical college system and also
Yes.
with Richard Woods and our education people across the state to help develop some things, even in the high schools?
Yes, we are in high schools with the soft skills. That's what the Georgia Best program actually started, was in the high schools. We're also in several of the technical colleges. Matter of fact, we just recently hired the lady who helped implement it in a lot of technical colleges. We hired her to come work for us to help us expand the program in more places because she did such a great job with them. We're looking to get that out to everywhere. Because it is very necessary. I mean, I like to see it in every single school system. Right now, we are in half of all the school systems across the state. And we generally work directly with the school system because it's a very flexible program. There's no mandates except for the fact that the kids have to be good. If they're going to certify them and give them a certificate, they have to hit the marks on the 10 areas. Mm-hmm. And so if they do that, then they can be certified. Now, if you don't want them to be certified and you just want to teach it, then that's fine. We'll let you do that too, but they won't get certified. So yes, it's we're putting in as many schools as we can get it in.
Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question. You said that our trust fund was now at about 1.4 million, and we needed to be about billion. I'm sorry, and we need to be at 2.5 to 3. How long do you anticipate it'll be before we get there?
The last numbers that I saw that we should be fairly close, probably just under 2 billion by the end of this calendar year. So it may be, another 2 years to get it where we need to.
And
Mainly
what-
because of the fact that we're seeing the revenue go down because people's tax rates are going down because more people are working and less people are getting laid off.
One more question is, so you're looking at that time frame before we could consider any lowering the cost on?
What I would say is, and obviously we'll make sure we keep the committee informed, I would prefer not to do anything this year. But going into next year, let's see where it's at, and if it's possible to do some relief, maybe a little bit, depending on where we are. If we actually outdo what our estimates are, and let's say that we breach 2 billion, and we get a little bit over that, then maybe we can take a look at a little bit of a break off that 50% surcharge, maybe.
Very
But
good.
I think I would strongly caution to mess with that too much because I was sitting in the exact same chair you guys were back when I was in General Assembly on this exact same committee. Matter of fact, I was the vice chair of this committee at one time. And we probably made some moves that we shouldn't have made by reducing that surcharge a little bit too quickly, because it looked like we were out of the woods, that the economy had made the turn after that first recession, that small one, because nobody saw that second one coming, and that got us. And maybe if we hadn't have, messed with those surcharges for those 3 years, it might not have been as bad. We probably still would have had to borrow a little bit of money, but maybe not $1 billion worth.
Speaking of borrowed money, have we repaid all that?
Oh, yes, we had that paid back a long time ago.
Yeah,
Matter
I
of
thought we
fact-
had, but I wasn't sure, but I thought I'd ask the question. But, you know,
Matter of fact, we earned
it is gonna
27
be, it is gonna be a little bit of a question as to whether or not, when is the time to give some relief versus do you wait till you get the trust fund where you want it to be? And I know you're gonna be cautious about that, but boy, it hurts right now. But thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the commissioner? Well, thank you again for your patience as well with us and being here today.
And the one last thing I'll leave you with, I didn't mention it, but we put it in your book. There's a booklet in there, and I know it says 2016. You're thinking, wow, I have an outdated booklet. That is something I just wanted you guys to have. It was from our business summits that we had last year. We hold these in all the different regions, 16 of them. And in there is that what we also give out to the employers. It has a lot of good stuff in it, a lot of good phone numbers. We do those business summits to keep employers up to date on regulatory changes. We usually have USDOL send somebody out there. We have labor lawyers and other speakers that talk about things that help local businesses. And we generally average anywhere between 70 to 100 businesses show up to these. And I'll add this one last thing. If when we're in your area, if you ever want to stop by and say a few words, maybe 5-10 minutes, just to greet the businesses that are in your area, you're more than welcome to do that. And if anybody would like us to contact you when we do our business summit in your area this next year, because we do them every year, just let us know, and we'll make sure that you have a chance to come in and say hello to the local businesses and welcome them there, and maybe even introduce me and give me a good introduction.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Members of the committee, we're going to have a subcommittee meeting tomorrow, the Manufacturing and Labor Relations Subcommittee, chaired by Representative Kirby here. Remember, we have 2 subcommittees. We're all members, the whole committee is member of that subcommittee. It's a process we go through, we're getting our bills out. So tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we have a notice out now, room 506 here, and we're going to hear House Bill 243. All right, anybody have anything else? We're adjourned. Thank you. Thanks.